today to the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission meeting. Today's January 16th, 2014. Today is a committee day. My name is Jeff McMillan. I'm the chairman. This time we'll start with Ms. Barber to give us a roll call, please. Are you okay? Okay.
Jim Bledsoe.
Here.
Harold Cannon.
Here.
Bill Cox.
Here.
Jeff Griggs.
Here.
Jeff McMillan.
Present.
Tom Rice.
Here.
Jim Ripley. Clayton Stout. James Stroud. Trey Teague.
Here.
David Watson.
Here.
Jamie Woodson. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Barber. Do we have any announcements at this time from the commission or from Director Carter? Okay. We'll move on. First of all, I want to say that we're certainly appreciative of Ducks Unlimited to give us such a nice venue to have our meeting, and certainly a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to taking a tour of the facility, and I hope the rest of the commission will do so likewise. I want to welcome our guest today. I know we have former Commissioner Julie Schuster here. Would you, people forgot what you look at, would you please stand up? She asked me that I would introduce her. And I know we have some other guests. I know Ron Crabtree's here. Thank you for coming. I'm not surprised to see you here, but we're glad you're here. So, and we have several, Mr. McFarland, so we're glad that y'all are with us. There will be a sheet going around. I hope everyone will sign it, and so that we can know who came. I will say that we invite anyone who wants to address the commission to please raise your hand during the appropriate committee meeting that relates to the subject matter of which you're concerned with. I'll ask that you come to the microphone, introduce yourself and who you represent, if anyone or a group, and please address your questions to the chairman of the committee or to myself. I do reserve the right to limit the conversation if it does become repetitive. So with that, we'll move on to our Wildlife Management Committee. Trey Teague, chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner McMillan. At this time, I'd like to introduce Daryl Radijak, Chief Wildlife Division, to discuss our hunting seasons.
Thank you, Commissioner Teague. What I'm going to do today, as most of you know, our fall hunting seasons, primarily for big game, are just wrapping up. Luckily, we're still in the duck season, and understood you enjoyed a very good duck hunt yesterday. But what I'm going to do, if we could start from the first slide, please. If you escape and then hit F5, that should do it. Thank you. Well, like Commissioner Teague said, I'm Daryl Radijak. I'm the Chief of Wildlife for the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, and I just want to give that end-of-year wrap-up for all of our big game hunting seasons. I'm going to start with the white-tailed deer season, and this is going to be a cursory look at what just concluded. We will have a more in-depth analysis at the April Commission meeting when we get into our season-setting time. As you know, with the season just ending a week or two ago, there's still some data that we're still getting in. We need to compile all that data and then have our biologists really comb through it with a fine-tooth comb, like we do every single year. But just like I said, from a cursory look, if we look at the deer season that just concluded, our harvest numbers look like this. Right now they stand at 168,000, just over 168,000. That number could move a little. It's not going to move a lot. It could move a little. How do we feel about that number? We're quite pleased. As wildlife populations go, when you restore populations, you have this more or less exponential growth, and you can see that growth that occurred throughout the 80s and into the 90s. And then those populations more or less peak, and then they come back down and settle out. And literally, once you have the populations at the point that you would like them at, they'll oscillate back and forth. And as you can see, over the last 10 years or so, we've been oscillating. So we've been doing exactly what's predicted of wildlife populations. So that 168,000 is right on par. It's kind of what we expect, and we're very pleased with it. However, you do see a big red asterisk. And the reason I put that big red asterisk there is we had a fairly substantial change in the way we check in big game animals in Tennessee. Although it was a simple addition, the fact that we can now use those wonderful gadgets called iPhones to check in your animals, it relinquishes the responsibility of a hunter to take those animals to check stations. And this addition of this new app that is a wonderful addition. I will tell you that most of the comments, almost all the comments we got in on that thing were just unbelievably good comments. They're very thankful for that new way of checking in the animal, and it makes the life of the hunter very simple. It did pose a concern for our biologists, and the reason being, once you allow self-check-in, now it was always volunteer check-in, or I take that back, it was not volunteer check-in, it's mandatory check-in. You have to check in a big game animal once you kill it because we need to collect some data off of that. And once you allow the hunters to take the animal home, there's always concern on whether or not the quality of your data goes down. And so, believe it or not, up until 2008, it was all mandatory. You had to take your animals to a physical check station to check that animal in. We were always under the assumption that it kept people extremely honest when they're inside a store somewhere or a gas station checking in an animal, and the animal is in the back of their truck. We believed that we got really good, reliable data. And we're, as most of you know, looking at other states, Tennessee has some of the best, if not the best data, at least in the southeast, but I would compare it against most other states in the entire nation. So we have great biological data when it comes to our big game animals. In 2009, we introduced something that was new to us, and it caused some concern, especially from the law enforcement side of things. We allowed people to begin checking in their deer via the internet. And in 2009, about 11%, 1 out of 10 people began taking their deer directly home and checking their animals in. So still 90% of the folks, 9 out of 10 folks, were still going to check stations. And over time, that increased to the next year about 1 out of 5, then 1 out of 4, and then 1 out of 3 people were checking their deer in at home. But that still left the vast majority of people going to check stations, and so we still had fantastic data. 2013, we added this new iPhone app. So coupled with the internet application and the iPhone application, 56%, more than half of all the big game animals that were killed were just checked in via phone and taken home. They bypassed all the check stations. So the question was, is our data still good? Because we're very proud of that, and it allows us to manage the resource the way we do. And so one of the concerns was, well, if people are going home, you have to understand in Tennessee, we allow, it's a $3 limit statewide. You're only allowed to kill $3 no matter what. In many, many places throughout the entire state, the doe harvest is pretty much unlimited. And in Unit L especially, and in Unit A, we have very liberal doe harvests. And so one of our questions in the back of our minds were people going home, and once they got home, would they check the bucks that they killed in, check them in as does, or not check them in at all so they could save their buck tag? And there was a real simple way to check to see if that was happening. We looked at the data, and one of the things you could do, if people stopped checking in the bucks, or if they checked them in fictitiously as does, we would see a change in the percent of does in the harvest. And I will be happy to report that looking over the years, it did not budge at all. So what it leads us to believe is that the data we're collecting, the hunters are very honest people. They're checking in the deer accurately, and we just provided a very beneficial system to it. We made it a whole lot easier to them, and we believe our data is still very, very sound. Now, going along that same principle about how good our data is, when we look at the biological data for deer, you have to keep in mind that we don't age every single deer. We don't accept information that's given to us by the general public. We aged over 3,000 deer. Our wildlife biologists and wildlife managers throughout the agency actually laid their hands on over 3,000 deer and aged them using that severing house method of tooth wear. Over 2,000 of those animals happen to be bucks, and that's one thing a lot of people are really concerned with. And if you look, again, we're right on track. This year, 43% of our harvest turned out to be the aged, the buck age structure. 43% were yearlings, 40% were 2.5, and the remaining 17% were 3.5 and older. So almost 1 out of 5 bucks were 3.5 years of age and older. Some people may think this is good, some people may think it's bad, but if you look at all the other states that have open bag limits where you can shoot any deer you want, in other words, they don't have antler restrictions, this compares right in line with them. So even the Midwestern states that are known as the trophy buck states have very similar ratios to this. And so we're very, very pleased with the biological data we got on the white-tailed deer. So that's it for now. When Chuck Yost presents the season setting in April, we'll have a little bit more information, maybe a little bit of history to go along with that. But does anyone have any questions about this year's deer harvest?
Darrell, how are we aging the deer if we're all being checked in on a phone app? How do we know that?
Well, we still have 44% are still going to check stations. And so I must credit the biologists within our agency. We used to age about 5,000 to 6,000 deer, but because half of them are now going home, the sample size that they're seeing when they're sitting at a check station all day long has gone down considerably. And so we only got our hands on about 3,000 deer, but it's still a really good sample size. What we do is we pick the high harvest days of the year, which is opening day of muzzleloader season and opening day of gun. And we send our biologists. Most biologists, most managers are scheduled to work that day. It's unfortunate for them. But we send them to the check stations that we know are going to see a large number of deer. We're moving more and more towards sending them to check stations that also serve as processors or sending them to processors. So when those deer come in, as the deer come in, we get their TWA ID number, we age the deer, we take antler measurements, we take a lot of the biological data, but it's our folks that are doing all the measurements.
Have we had any vendors that had customary check-in stations that are upset that we've gone to a phone app?
I have not heard any complaints. I'm not the one that they would call, though. Whether or not they would contact our agency in the revenue department, I have not heard of any complaints.
Thank you.
I've used the mobile app, and
It's wonderful.
As long as you've got good phone service, it's wonderful.
Yeah, I checked in a deer before I climbed out of the deer stand.
Questionable phone service, it's the phone. It's slow, but
Yes.
I mean,
But
it's
I
fine for each page to come up. But
I will tell you we've received numerous compliments on allowing the hunters to do this. It makes their life a whole lot easier, because that was one of our biggest complaints 5 or 6 years ago, is trying to find a check station, and more and more folks have the iPhone or internet service, and it's real easy to check in an animal. And we're very pleased to see that it does not appear to have affected our data.
Mr. Chairman, I think I'm talking here. At the Archery Trades Association meeting a week ago in Nashville, we had a room set up so if any of the people who were distributors or whatever wanted to come by and talk, they could. And that one of the things that they did raise was the questions about the check-in stations no longer functioning in the role that they traditionally have. And there are two primary things that came to their mind. One was that the social issues that went with that. A lot of people enjoyed the interaction there to checking station, talking with other people. And then they had some concern that what would happen to them in terms of driving people to their businesses, because in the past people would come, and of course while they were there was some interaction of buying some kind of merchandise. They went on to say they understood the world we live in, and that's what people are demanding. But just to answer your question, I don't know if that's really a complaint, but it was identified as a concern.
let's see.
Go ahead. No, I just assumed that there was a lot of people that check in by phone but still go by the check-in station because they want to show their deer off anyway.
Well, to that end, they had picture boards, and they were encouraging people, even if they did check them in, to come by, and they're doing that. They had some little minor social issues. They were allowing people to do tune-ups on bows and those kind of things, anything that they could do to bring people back in there in association with that.
What's the cost relation on the internet versus the POS? Didn't it cost us something to check in a deer on the POS?
Again, I'm not about 70 cents at the check station, but is it for both? 70 cents
At the POS?
to get it, even with regardless of the way it comes in.
Michael's a better person to talk about that, but it's roughly 70 to 74 cents that it costs us for each animal that's checked in. So whether it's a turkey, a deer, or whatever it is, if it goes into the check-in station, whether it goes through the internet or any other way, it has to go into our real system so we have accountability for it. And that transaction costs us about 74 cents for each one. Is that pretty close, Michael?
We got the thumbs up. Okay, again, we'll have much more in-depth analysis at the April commission meeting. But moving on, just a look at the black bear season, which just concluded. Not going to talk too much about black bears. Just have one graph here just to show you what the harvest looked like. This year we killed 502 bears. Again, because it's so soon after the season, this number might adjust by 1 or 2 if there's been a tag that has not been entered yet. But it ended up being the 3rd highest bear harvest on record. We're very pleased. The bear population continues to go very strong. One of the reasons I divided up this slide this way, you can see it's broken out between the method of take, whether or not it is still hunting or dog hunting. The vast majority of bears that are killed in Tennessee are through the use of dogs, so it's alive and well, and they're doing a fantastic job at taking bears. I will tell you this April, when we propose bear seasons, we'll be addressing the Cumberland Plateau issue. We don't know exactly what is going to be proposed, but we will be talking about that and hopefully looking for more expansion of bear opportunities. Moving on past black bear, if you have any questions about black bears.
Did you have a breakdown on archery versus gun or anything?
We will in April.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, we have all that. We usually have a much more in-depth analysis. Fall turkey season, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. Fall turkey season is not extremely popular. Just looked at the last 5 or 6 years, and you can see what I'm talking about with the oscillation. It bounces back and forth. We usually harvest anywhere from 1,500 to about 3,000 birds in the fall, which equates to about, I think it's around 7 or 8% of the harvest. So the fall turkey season is just a minuscule opportunity to take birds. There's definitely been some questions recently about our turkey management and what we're going to do in areas that we have concern. And again, when we come before you in April, we'll have a much better understanding of what our recommendations will be, because we'll have discussed all this with our regional biologists. Any questions on the fall turkey? Now, the one thing I want to remind all the commissioners of, this is the start of our season setting. So this is actually when our biologists go to work. Our law enforcement officers have been pulling double time throughout the season, doing a fantastic job. And now's the grunt period for our biologists and managers. This is the start of the season setting process. Just a couple of days ago, we released the press release that announced for public comments for this upcoming hunting season. So we solicit comments from the public, and I will tell you without a doubt, every comment we get in is looked at by someone in the agency. And so sometimes we get a few dozen comments, sometimes we get a few hundred comments. We do look at them all, but because the volume and sometimes because of the recommendation, we can't usually heed the advice on all of them. The other thing that I want to remind you is we're very pleased with where we are in most of our big game seasons. So the herd is healthy, the flock is healthy, the bear numbers are expanding, and so we're extremely pleased with the management going so far. And if you look at the UT survey that more or less asked the general public and our hunters how we're doing, they believe it's going well as well. Turkey has the 90% satisfaction rate. Even deer hunting has 80% satisfaction rate. And so when we come into the season setting process, we're not looking to make big changes, but we always welcome carburetor adjustments that might make it even a little bit better than it was the year before. So we will compile all those. We'll even let the commission provide some recommendations in the public comment period. Remember, you got to get it in. But we're starting that process, and again, we'll present our recommendations in April for voting on in May. Any questions about the big game seasons that just concluded?
Darryl, do you know the sex breakdown on the fall turkey? How many gobblers and how many hens out of that? Do you have that with you? I
could find that out before I leave today. I don't have it on hand, but the greatest thing, and this is one thing, I believe you, Commissioner Cox, commented on Tennessee having excellent data compared to other states, and I will back that up all the time. The other thing that I'm very proud of our agency for doing is we are transparent as all get out. All the information that our biologists use to manage our species is on our website. You go there and you can look up the information that you just asked for. I'll just go back to the computer and look it up on the public side of things, because all that information is at the fingertips of the public. What I like about that is it makes sure we stay on top of our toes. So if the public sees something that's looking weird, it's right there for them to see it, and they can tell us and say, hey, what's going on here? So it's a great tool to use to really make sure that we're up to snuff with our management practices. Okay. The other thing that I was asked to present, and I have to thank Region 3 for giving this information to me. Kirk Miles sent it to me just the other day. Wanted to give you just a little update on how the wild hog control season went on Catoosa. I'm more or less going to put up what they sent me. As you know, it was divided up into two different segments this year, 2 5-day segments. The first segment, back in December, we killed 12 hogs. Had about 120 hunters, and the majority of those hunters were local to that area. The second segment, which was in January, just ended a few days ago, they estimated 72 hunters. It is down quite a bit. We also did have extremely cold weather, so that probably kept a lot of the guys at home. They did see more non-local hunters, so to speak. But what I find absolutely wonderful, well, not from the hunter standpoint, but the hunters commented that they were not seeing the number of hogs that they had in past years, and they truly did believe that the hog population declined considerably on Catoosa. That is information that is very useful to us because, as you know, Catoosa is where we've really instituted heavy trapping, and to show evidence of population decline through the use of trapping reinstills our belief that that is the way to get rid of hogs, is through trapping. So overall, we had much less participation this year than we did last year, and the number of hogs has been impacted by our efforts out there, and it can be used as an example of how you can actually negatively impact hog populations with the proper management tools.
Bill, do you remember the number of hogs we killed that was taken last year?
John, would you happen to recall?
So we went from 350 to 32?
Oh, I'm sorry, during
The Catoosa hunts.
No.
I was on the trapping numbers. I don't recall the number of the hunt from last year.
Okay.
It is down, but I'm believing it is around the 50 or 60 mark from last year.
Generally, it stays about that same numbers right there, generally.
All right, any questions on that control season? Last but not least, the last update I will provide is an update on our Sandhill crane season, which concluded on January 1st. I will tell you that I'll tell you a number that is a little bit higher than what some may have heard. We just recently got the last batch of mail from the Postal Service, and we had a clump of survey cards that came in. And my guys back in the Wildlife Division did a fantastic job compiling those and getting those to me last night, and I just updated my slide for you today. The Sandhill crane season, as you know, went from Thanksgiving Day to January 1st. It was our inaugural season, and we really didn't know what to expect. They have never been hunted in Tennessee. They were hunted in Kentucky, and Kentucky harvest numbers over the first couple of years were fairly low, I believe, in the 40 or 50 range that first year, and then it jumped up to 92. Tennessee had a much better result. We gave out 400 people received permits for 3 cranes each. So the potential to kill 1,200 cranes. Keep in mind, this is much lower than what the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service allowed us to take. And so 309 cranes out of 1,200 is about 25% of the quota was filled on that Sandhill crane hunt. We did break it out by county. There's 5 counties represented this year. Obviously, the big ones are Meigs and Ray, and that's primarily where Hiwassee Refuge lies, where that star is. Obviously, the reason that we had a much higher kill than Kentucky more, for the most part, is a flyover state for those sandhills. We have the luxury of having a large wintering population of sandhill cranes, and as you can tell, when they congregate in an area, we know how to get at them. So 309 cranes. Once again, this number may vary by a couple because there might be a postcard or two that comes in, but that's the total: 257 adults, 52 juveniles. If you look at when they're harvested, there's really not really good information. I like doing graphs and putting them up there, but that's how the harvest went throughout the year. You had your weekend peaks and holiday peaks when the hunters got out there and had vacation time. And then this is what I thought was extremely interesting. Of those 309 birds that were killed, they were killed by 127 hunters. We collected, not only did they have to send in a permit once they killed a bird, they had to more or less send in a kill tag to us. That's how we kept track of the numbers. But they're also required to complete a survey card, which asked a number of questions. And a couple of things that were very interesting from this survey: if you look at the average length of the hunt, the hunter, when he went out there going after sandhills, he hunted about 4 hours. And we asked them to estimate how many sandhills they saw on their hunt. And the average number of cranes they saw on one hunt in a 4-hour hunt was over 1,700 sandhills. And so the population of sandhills is doing quite well. We did our count again on Hiwassee Refuge, and this was one of those anomaly years. I believe it was over 40,000, if I'm not mistaken. And that was right up there with one of the highest counts ever. Why it's like that, with a lot of the cold weather that we had up north, it pushed a lot more birds down to us that don't typically make it down to us. And so we had a huge number of sandhills on the refuge this year. I will remind everyone that the Sandhill Crane Festival is beginning today, or tomorrow. And so I strongly encourage anyone to go visit the Sandhill Crane Festival. It's going to be just as big as it always has been. And there's a ton of birds down there for those folks to enjoy. The last thing I do want to mention, whooping cranes, that was a big concern when we were passing this inaugural season. The survey card also asked the question of how many whooping cranes have you seen? And there was, I believe, 17 whooping cranes observed, and that was out of all the hunters. And so, in fact, it was 14 whooping cranes were observed. So comparatively speaking, the number of whooping cranes out there is just a small fraction. Obviously, we know that the whooping cranes population is very, very low. I ran into the gentleman studying the whooping cranes, and he says there was about 7 or 8 that were using the refuge just a few weeks ago. And so the sad news to report, the whooping cranes did just fine. There's no incidents. The hunters did absolutely fantastic in Tennessee. The Fish and Wildlife Service, in case anyone reads about it or doesn't know about it, investigated a poaching act up in Kentucky back in November. There were 2 whooping cranes. It was a breeding pair that were killed in Kentucky back in November. This was before they had their season, so it was not hunter related or season related at all. But you will hear some discussion about the whooping cranes getting killed in Kentucky, and that's unfortunate. And we hope Kentucky gets the leads to catch that individual that did that. Any questions on the Sandhill crane season?
How do our numbers compare
I could get that information. The big states obviously are the Midwestern and the Western states that hunt sandhills. It's a different population that's much higher than the Mississippi the eastern population. Those other states, I could get those numbers, but they're well into the thousands, obviously. But again, their sandhill population is tremendously higher than ours. And so the thing that's really nice about ours, again, the Fish and Wildlife Service was approved of us taking up to over 2,200 cranes, and we reduced that and knocked it down to 1,200 potentially. And so we're just taking a small fraction of what would be permissible by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. All right. I am all done with that. And if I could steal Commissioner Teague's thunder, what I'd like to do is introduce our next speaker, because